All right, welcome to Ever Vigilant Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Joe Prim, and I am glad to be back. It has been a long time since the last episode of Ever Vigilant. The weekend after Memorial Day, or I should say Labor Day, we went on a family camping trip, and since then I have been working nonstop. So this is my first opportunity to get back in here and do a podcast, and I am looking forward to it. I got a lot of notes, a lot of things I've been thinking about, and if you stay tuned all the way through this episode, when I first started doing this podcast, I would regularly share a funny story from being a parent, from my kids at the end of the podcast. So I got a good one for this episode. So if you've missed that, or if you want to skip ahead because this podcast gets too boring, check out the story at the end. I think it'll make you laugh. Either way, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you get something out of it. If you're coming back for more, thanks to you. I do appreciate your loyalty. What I want to talk about in this episode is foundation. What is your life built on? As I look around these days, I see a lot of people that don't have anything solid that their life is built on. They don't have anything that they go back to when times get tough. They don't have a set of beliefs or a set of ideals or virtues or morals that are deep down, like a set of roots going deep into the earth to hold the tree steady during the storms and during the difficult times in life. I see a lot of people that bounce to and fro on what they believe in, what they stand on. More, it seems, based on what is trendy, what is popular at the time. They're always looking for the talking points that they get from a politician or a sports star or a TV actor so that they know what to parrot. They have not taken the time to meditate on, to think about, to come up with their own set of beliefs. And I think that is something that is really lacking in our society right now. There is so much noise around us. We are bombarded constantly with advertising or checking your status on some social media platform, constantly checking emails. There are so many distractions in life that we have very little time to form concrete, strong opinions on things that in reality really matter. Years ago, I remember seeing a quote or an ad or something that said, if you want to hear a very well-formed opinion on something, ask a cowboy, because they spend a lot of time alone, free from distractions. As the years have gone by, that thought has stuck in my head. As the years have gone by, and the level of distractions is only constantly increasing. And the more I've thought about that saying or that thought of spending time alone away from distractions helps you form opinions, I think that it's very true. So let me guide this wagon kind of back on topic here, and let's talk about building foundations. I don't think that you can start talking about building foundations without hitting up what it says in the Bible in Matthew 7:24-27. And this is what it says. Anyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it was founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell. So I'm going to get a little personal in this episode. I've kind of refrained from that. I've kind of put myself kind of in the back burner and tried to just give the facts rather than opinions on things. But we're going to get a little personal on this, and I want to share the three main things that I have as a foundation. If you've ever listened to this podcast before, you know them. You know them. But I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into why faith, family, and freedom are the three pieces of foundation for me. Yours may be different. Don't just go with what I'm saying. I believe that this is very important, that we know what we stand for and what we believe in. Take some time out. Step away from the everyday craziness. Go for a walk. Go to the park. Spend some time thinking of what's most important to you and why those things are most important to you. And form your own list of the most important pieces of your foundation. For me, the bedrock of my life is my faith. I am a sinner saved by grace through faith. That means nothing that I can do or have done could save me because it was a gift. On this one thing, everything else in my life comes second, and everything else in my life sits firmly on top of that. That is the bedrock of my life. Second is my family. God has blessed me with an awesome wife and two wonderful kids, and they are the driving force behind almost all the decisions that I make. My faith, though, influences, because the faith is the bottom, it influences how I treat my wife and my kids. The things I teach my children, honesty and respect, and the things I try to show them by example, love, joy, self-control, go right back again to what's number one. Faith, my beliefs. And number three is freedom. Without freedom, my faith would not be negated. My faith would not change. Would those that share my faith, would we have to operate differently? Yes, of course. But that faith itself would not change. In fact, faith and Christian beliefs often spread through times without freedom and in places without freedom, like the growing church in China or in Iran. So faith can and will exist without freedom. And family will exist and can even be enjoyed in places where there's no freedom. Obviously not in the same way, but yet family still exists. And even in places where there is no freedom or very little freedom, there's still a respect for family. The reason freedom then is number three to me is because many of the things that I believe in or many of the things that I enjoy would be taken away by freedom. Things that I believe in, like the freedom of speech, the freedom to have your own opinion, the freedom of religion, the Second Amendment. Those things would be done away with without freedom. And that is why freedom is so important to me. And another thing would be pursuit of happiness or career changes or changes in what you do. Because at my age, I would have had too much time and energy invested into me in the position that I'm in to ever let me leave or try to do something else. So those are the three most important things in my life. On everything else, I build off of those. Those things, and this is what I would say to you too, if you're trying to come up with and understand what the most important things are to you in your life, And this is not something we talk about again in our society and our culture very much these days. Would you be willing to put your life on the line? Would you be willing to die for these things? Do you believe in your faith or in your family or in freedom enough that you would put your life on the line for it? Let that be your test for what belongs in the most important things to you. So let me get into a little bit why I've been thinking so much and meditating so much on this topic, because it wasn't what I was originally thinking about doing this next episode on. But a couple years ago, our family moved out to a rural community. This is something that is new to us, but we did it for many reasons. We want to try to grow some of our own food. I believe it's an awesome environment for kids to grow up in. Having property to roam, trees to climb, creeks to play in, animals to wrestle with. It's an excellent environment for kids to grow up in. In fact, at some point I'll probably do an episode about that, because that's one of the most exciting things for me about where we're living now. We wanted to get away from the chaos, the fast pace, wanted to be in a more peaceful area than the suburbs. And we were able to find a cheaper home and pay a whole lot less taxes than we were paying where we were living before. But moving out to this rural area that we love and enjoy so much came with a price. And that price is my daily commute. My daily commute is roughly 5.5 plus hours each day. 2 hours to get to work in the morning, and depending on traffic, if I'm lucky, 2.5, more often than not, 3+ hours for a ride home. Now, that's not to say I didn't use or I don't use that time to the best of my abilities. I spent good times talking on the phone with my father, who's out of the country, and with my mom, that are out of the country right now. And I hadn't done that for many years, so that was invaluable. Talking to my brother, building relationships with friends over the phone that would not have happened had I not had that commute time. Spent a lot of time listening to podcasts. If you ever need some suggestions for podcasts, I've listened to a lot of them, and I would have a lot of great suggestions for you. Listen to podcasts on anything from farming to business to just storytelling, news. I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, anything from the classics like A Tale of Two Cities to 1984 to sci-fi movies to books about leadership and business. And I've spent a lot of time just in quiet listening to the tires on the asphalt, just praying, meditating, and thinking about things that are going on in the world around us and what I want the future or my future or the future of my family to look like. But as time has passed these last 2 years, despite my best efforts of using my commute time wisely, refusing offered overtime work, and stepping down from a leadership role at work, that this is unsustainable. I've come to realize that the things that I claim are most important in my life, the things that I am saying and believe are the foundation, are being compromised by the amount of time I'm spending at work and commuting to work. My faith is being compromised because I have little or no time to serve, very little time to read and study the Bible, and no time to meet or encourage other people. My family takes a hit because they don't get the best of me. They get what's left over after I'm sucked dry at the end of the day. They get the me that just sat in traffic driving home for 3 hours. They're getting the worn out, tired me. Very little time to spend one-on-one with my wife, maybe 20, 25 minutes a day. How can I tell her or tell others or make the claim that she is very important to me if that's all the time that I can allot for her in a given day? Every day when I come home from work, I do the chores with my kids so that we can spend time together. And we do, but again, they aren't getting the better part of me. And just to clarify and make sure people understand kind of what I'm talking about here, regularly I get up at 2:30 in the morning to go to work. And if I start at that time, normally I'm getting home about 4:30, 5 o'clock. So by the time chores are done, dinner's done, I am to a point where I need to go to bed so that I can get, 5 or 6 hours of sleep so that I don't fall asleep on my commute in the next morning. And I know there are others of you out there that are listening to this that are in the same boat or maybe in a worse position. What I am saying is don't feel bad for me, because I'm not trying to say feel bad for me. What I am saying is you too should reconsider your actions and how you are living your life, and if the time that you're spending in your job is the best thing for your family, for your beliefs on your foundation, or are you compromising those beliefs so that you can have your job? Or for some of you, your job may be on your list for the most important things in your life. And if it is, I am so happy for you because I wish I was at that spot, but I'm not. So when you come to a point, or when I came to this point to realize with full clarity and could no longer deny that what I am doing is unsustainable. There is no way that I can sustain this and feel that I am the best father, the best husband that I can be, and be spending this amount of time with my job. So at that point, you need to make a choice. Are the things that you're saying are important to you, or are you just going to keep doing what you're doing because that's already what you're doing? I've decided to step out and try something different. Things were slowing down at work. I knew there was going to be some people that were going to be laid off or let go. I volunteered to be laid off, and the owner of the company graciously granted me my freedom. Doing this is a big step of faith. Doing this is a big step towards trusting that if my priorities are correct and I don't compromise them and I do what I believe is the best for me and those priorities on that list, that good things will happen, that I will be blessed. Where does this go from here? I'll be honest, I don't really know. I don't have everything all completely ironed out. But I've been taking baby steps towards this for a while, and many of the things that I've been wanting to do to get more involved in, I have not been able to do because of the time constraints. So at this time, I had an opportunity to get out from a job where I know in the future when work picks back up again, I can get back in, but I needed some time here to get some things going, to get some things started. So what am I going to do now with all this free time that I have? Number one, of course, there's two priorities. Faith and family are top of the list. Spending time and energy and effort on those two things during this time will be my top priorities. But I also am going to spend this time organizing and getting things set up on the homestead here, prioritizing and sorting out some ideas on how we can make some income through farmers markets in the local area. Number two, or these really aren't numbered in any particular order, that's just how it's on my notes, is work on this podcast. I have been very sporadic in this podcast. I have not put the time in, obviously we go back to time again, into this podcast that I would have liked to and that I want to. So this means that there should be more podcasts and that the podcast will get better because I'll have more time to work on the idea that I want to have come across in the episode. Another thing that I'm going to work on is getting a business going with a hobby that I've had for several years now, building holsters and knife sheaths out of kydex. It's been something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, spent a lot of time organizing these ideas in my mind, a lot of time playing around with this product, or I shouldn't say a lot of time, but as much time as I possibly could, especially in these last couple of years. But this is something that a medium that I really enjoy working in. I enjoy crafting things, and at this time, especially now with the concealed carry market ramping up so exponentially, I would like to get into building holsters and knife sheaths, custom and semi-custom, because it's something that I enjoy doing and something that I'm good at. Another thing would be I want to get a website set up for this podcast, someplace where I could sell those holsters and sheaths, something to work off from that, someplace where I can also do some blogging, do some ideas. I love working on lists. That's kind of the way I think. That's why I said the number 2 on the the podcast, because that's kind of the way my mind thinks. I think in lists. So I would love to have a blog where even if it just come up with lists of the main things you should carry with you for first aid, or here are 10 things that you never thought of throwing in your everyday carry bag. The list could go on and on of different ideas, but I would enjoy doing something like that. So I have some different ideas. I have some things that that I will be working on in my time off here, getting things set up, getting things rolling, and I'm excited about it. I'll be honest with you, I am very, very excited about this. So this brings me to what can you do to help me share this podcast? If you would share this podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. Share it with somebody that you think would enjoy it, somebody that you think might get something out of this. If you would also review this podcast. I've never asked really for you guys to review this podcast. It does make a big difference. I actually saw the other day I have a 5-star review on iTunes. That kind of blew me away, but I do appreciate the reviews. You could follow me on social media. I have an account on Twitter and on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram at TheEverVigilant, and the same on Twitter, TheEverVigilant. You can always DM me or direct message me on either of those, and I'll get back to you. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate any ideas, any thoughts you have about the podcast. Or you can email me at evervigilantpodcast@gmail.com. And again, I'd like to hear from you guys. Any thoughts, ideas, any sort of feedback on how to make this podcast better, I would greatly appreciate it. Also, let me know if there'd be any interest in starting a Facebook page for this podcast. I really loathe Facebook. I absolutely abhor Facebook. But if there's interest, it's something that I would consider to help spread the word on this podcast. So before I go, let me tell you this funny story. And this is, I guess, what happens when you have just a little bit more time to spend with your children. and a little bit more time to, as I talk about in the open your ears part of the open concept of listening to what people have to say rather than hearing. So my kids have been kind of on a Aesop's Fables fix lately. They've been listening to Aesop's Fable audiobook at night before they go to bed and have been reading the stories about Aesop's Fables. They love them because they're short, they're quick, and they always have a moral to them, and they kind of get their brains thinking a little bit. So a couple days ago, I was spending a little bit of time with my son, and I was asking him which of the Aesop's Fables was his favorite. So he got into a discussion about how he really liked the story about the tortoise and the hare, that was definitely one of his favorite fables. So we talked a little bit about it. He explained the story, kind of ran down the storyline. You all know the story of the tortoise and the hare. But anyway, the tortoise wins the race. So he's telling me about it, his take on it. And I ask him, well, what's the moral of the story? And he looks at me and he says, don't take naps. So there you go. There's my funny story. He had me cracking up and laughing because really the moral of the story couldn't be further from that. So he had me cracking up. We had a little bit of discussion after that about what it really was, and he had a good chuckle out of it himself. He thought he was quite clever coming up with his own moral for the story. So thanks again for listening. I do appreciate it. Remember, guys, there's a reason why every week I say faith, family, and freedom.